The swim is the shortest discipline and it also comes first when you're freshest. That said though, it's often the discipline that causes the most anxiety and nerves for the majority of beginners.
If you're worried about your first triathlon swim, or you're just sure you've been doing it all wrong, we're here with some tips and tricks so you can nail your first triathlon swim.
Lots of novice athletes and even more experienced ones can find the swim really quite daunting. It's not unusual to get anxiety around this discipline. However, being the shortest of the three, it has less bearing on your overall race, but you do still need to get through it. But that said, a bad swim isn't going to ruin your overall triathlon. You can still end up having a really good result, but you can't win a triathlon on the swim. You can lose it.
Yeah, so the goal then would be to get through the swim as quickly as possible, but without unduly affecting your bike and run performance and your overall performance. Now, nerves, stress, anxiety, and even the not too uncommon panic attack is definitely going to affect your overall performance. So, assuming you already know about the actual swim training part, how do you train specifically for race day? While most, if not all, of your swim training will happen in a swimming pool, there are some things that you simply can't train in the swimming pool. Wetsuit swimming, sighting and navigating, running and jumping into the water, and often the most intimidating for unsure swimmers, making physical contact with other swimmers. All of these things can and might affect your race day swim, and you need to practice each of them before race day. And if possible, practice all of them at once at some point before race day. You can practice using your wetsuit in the pool, just put it on for the warm-up and make sure you take it off before you get too warm, especially if your training pool is warm. Your body can't dissipate heat when it's in the water and you will overheat pretty quickly in your wetsuit. So use it for the warm-up and then hop out and strip it off. You can also practice sighting in the pool. Just stand a water bottle or something similar at the end of your lane and lift your head once or twice every length to check that where the water bottle is. Once you can do this fairly smoothly, then you can start closing your eyes for a few strokes before you sight and get used to not having that black line. Just don't do this when the lane is too busy. Once you're used to your wetsuit, it's time to hit the open water. Ideally, you want something similar to where your race is going to be held. So if it's a sea swim, in the sea, if it's a dam, in a dam, but any open water will really do. Start slowly. Work on swimming straight and sighting before you start adding pace and efforts and anything hard. Also, it's a good idea to try and practice how your race is going to start. If it's a land start, practice running in from the land into the water. If it's a deep water start, practice stopping, floating, staying still, and then starting your swim as quickly as possible. It's important to practice these things before you have to do them for real on race day. Finally, you're going to have to get used to having other swimmers around you while you're swimming. You are going to bump into people in your race swim, and you need to get used to it. The initial reaction when this happens on race day is to stop, lift your head, and see what you bumped into. But that's not going to help anyone, and it's definitely not going to help your triathlon swim time. The best thing to do when you bump into someone is to just keep swimming. Pretty much ignore what's just happened and keep moving forward. You might find that you're going slightly wayward and bumping into someone, but it equally might be them that's going wayward, or you might both be going wayward. It doesn't really matter as long as you all keep moving towards the next buoy.
Getting the right equipment can actually ease a lot of the anxiety. If you've got a wetsuit that doesn't fit properly, you could end up feeling restricted or waterlogged and basically feel like you're swimming in your clothes, which nobody wants. So what might seem like a great bargain off eBay really isn't going to be in the long run. And the same goes to a certain extent for your tri-suit. You want to make sure that it fits you properly before you get in the water when it's too late, but having something that's too baggy is just going to really make things much harder. And if you have a tri-suit that really doesn't fit, then you could consider wearing your swimsuit for the swim, especially if it's somewhere really hot, and then you can just get changed in transition. And yes, that might take you a little bit longer, but actually you will have used far less effort. You also want to be quite discerning when you're choosing your goggles. A pair that might work well enough in the pool and you can just about make up the pace clock are fine until you get to the open water, when just the brightness makes everything much harder to see, and you'll end up feeling really claustrophobic if you don't have a clear lens. So maybe try and keep a pair specifically for race day that are nice and new and have got that lovely clear lens, and even look at getting some open water specific goggles that have a wider range of view and maybe a lens that is going to lend itself to the light that you're probably going to be swimming in, and it will just make a huge difference because you want to be able to make sure you can see where you're going.
An important way to ensure your triathlon starts well is to make sure you warmed up. A good warm-up goes a long way to dissipating those pre-race nerves, and when your arms are warmed up, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable in the water. It also helps prevent that sudden rush of lactic acid 1 or 2 minutes after the start, which can really slow you down on race day. If you are able to get into the water for your pre-race warm-up, then swim easy for a few minutes, and then a few pickups towards race pace will get you well warmed up for that start. If you aren't able to get into the water before the race start, then some vigorous arm swinging does help to warm up the muscles, and you might want to consider bringing some stretch cords with you for race morning. Just keep the stretch cords nice and light. You don't want to wear out your arms before you start.
These days, and especially since COVID, most swim starts are rolling starts, and by that it basically means you're going into the water kind of one at a time or a few at a time, so everyone is naturally spread out, and your time will start as soon as your timing chip goes over that timing mat on the line. So it doesn't matter if you're not at the very front. And with that, it's worth bearing in mind that on the whole, swimmers get the opportunity to naturally seed themselves. So it might be worth trying to have a conversation with the others in the line to find out where the stronger swimmers are and where you might roughly fit in. Because if you're going too close to the front and you're slower than the people you're with, then you'll find lots of fast swimmers are going to be swimming over you, and that isn't great for your anxiety. But then on the other hand, if you're kind of too reserved and you start really close to the back and you're much quicker than those in front, then you're going to have to navigate around several bodies in the water, which is going to make your life much more difficult. If you do have a mass start, and there are still some, certain events will have waves, so say a few hundred people at a time, so it's still a mass start but it's smaller. Again, just try to make sure that you are sort of the right place in the row, so to speak, according to who's around you. And if you don't really like that feeling of being in amongst a group, then you can go slightly wider. You might be swimming a little bit further, but you'll at least be able to stay calm and sort of stay out of the masses.
Once your swim is all but done, you'll be forgiven for casting your mind ahead to the rest of the triathlon and hopping on your bike. But before you do, think about that swim exit. You want to start kicking your legs a little bit harder before you get to the swim exit, so you've got some blood flowing through them so that you can run through T1. And one final tip, as you swim up to that swim exit, keep swimming for as long as possible. The temptation is, as soon as you can see the ground, to put your feet down and then wade in to the end of the swim. But wading through the water is very slow, and you'll be much faster if you keep swimming until pretty much your hand touches the ground, and then stand up in that knee-deep water and run into T1.
Well, as you can see from this, there's a lot that you do need to cover, but the more that you've prepared beforehand, the more controlled your anxiety will be and the far better experience you'll have. So if you are about to do a triathlon or you've just done your first triathlon, do let us know how the swim portion's gone. You can do that in the comments section below. Give this video a like, and remember, you can also subscribe and you can follow us on social media.